कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी यादों में बरसातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें। मन की गहरी झील में कूद जाती हैं कभी, सोच के दरिया के संग संग बहती जाती हैं कभी। चाहे शाम हो या हो रातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें।
The lives of others has been described as searing, savage and deeply moving. It is a portrayal of times of turmoil and is absolutely unforgettable. This book has been shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize, and we are deeply excited to have with us the author Neil Mukherjee. Neil, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for
having me. Are
me.
you as excited as the rest of us?
I'm more shell-shocked than excited. The excitement may come later, but I haven't had time to sort of relax and be excited about things. Yes, a bit stunned.
It is a stunning book, isn't it? For the author, for the readers, because it's as if you've gone straight for the jugular.
Yes, I wanted to write a big book. I want to write a book with many people. I wanted to write a political novel. I wanted to get to render the times and the politics and the history and the details of people's lives and their tricks of thought and habits of mind and speech. I wanted to render all this as precisely and as truthfully as I can. And so I don't know about stunning, but it did require a lot of work.
You've done a lot of research, haven't you? The entire history of Bengal right from 1900s, especially the 68 to 70 period of the Naxalite movement.
Yes, the Naxalite period required a lot of work. It required a lot of research. I spoke to people. They're still alive. I can't tell you who they are.
But Amitabh Ghosh in his review has said that you were too young, but they are the ones who can, people like Rabindra Ray, Amitabh Ghosh can relate to what you have.
Yes, they have lived with these times.
Yes.
It was slightly after, it was slightly before my time.
Right.
But so I had to speak to people. I unearthed books. There's a great deal of Bengali literature about the Naxalite movement, as you can imagine. I read the party journals from the time, the CPI-ML journals, Deshabrati and Liberation in English and Deshabrati in Bengali. So that required a lot of research, yes, but it was pleasurable stuff.
The other character that you've done a lot of research for is Isuna.
Yes, yes, my maths prodigy. Yes, I had to do all the number theory papers myself because I wanted to do his proofs. I remember a gallery of mathematicians online laughing at Stieg Larsson's second novel in the Lisbeth Salander trilogy, because Lisbeth Salander sits on a tree stump and solves the Riemann conjecture, which is the biggest open problem in number theory. And the mathematicians all laughed and said that this is not exactly the way the world of mathematicians and mathematics works. And I thought, no, I have to get the maths right, because there'll be one mathematician who reads the book and I can't get it wrong for that person. So no, and I find the idea of Shona, a person who leaves the hell that is his life in order to make a new life for himself, just based on his talents. It's quite an affecting idea. It's what the central character of my first novel, Rhythmic, in A Life Apart, does as well.
You've done a lot of research also for the character of Sona.
Yes, I wanted to do all his proofs myself. And I know that there was a bit I read once where mathematicians took online to protest against the second novel by Stieg Larsson in the Lisbeth Salander trilogy, where Lisbeth Salander sits on a tree stump and solves the Riemann conjecture, and which is ridiculous because all the mathematicians wrote in this blog saying what ridiculous things novelists do and how stupid they are, and I thought I had to avoid this because there'd be one mathematician who read my book. And I didn't want to lose face, so I did all Shona's research for
yourself.
Him. Yes.
You've called him the next Ramanujan at various times in the novel, and one of the things that has come up as a comment is that mathematicians or geniuses are not swayambhu. They don't come, they are born of their circumstance. So here is Shona, who seems to be, a little island of light in a huge sea of darkness. So do you see it as in the same way?
No, I don't, but perhaps the darkness has contributed to his being a maths genius. So I don't see him as a Swayambhu at all. I don't see him as isolated. He's born with a gift, yes. But perhaps it is the hell of his circumstances that in some ways has nurtured that gift. It's easy to hold on to a gift when the rest of the world is so terrible that a gift becomes a kind of good thing that you can hold on to.
And Shona also seems to be, a continuum of the rhythmic character.
Yes, I find that idea of somebody leaving the hell of what he or she has been given in life and making a new life on his own, based on sheer talent or a gift. I find that idea quite affecting. Yes,
and exciting and intriguing.
So I think yes, there is a lot of rhythmic in Shona actually.
The other character which is really sweet and endearing is the character of Madan. I'm talking about the little beams of light in the novel.
Yes, I love Madan. I really I wrote him with all my heart. I think I gave him everything I could, and I like him a lot. And I tried to portray him with as much sympathy and as much equality as I could. And he's really one of the more positive people in the book. He and Shondha, who's Shupratik's mother, and Shona, they are all unqualifiedly good people.
And this is in a crowd of very complex, not so good people with strange passions. I hadn't even heard of corpophilia before I read the book.
Right. Well, I try to do it with a light hand, but it's what people are everywhere in the world. We are fallible, messy, not very nice creatures, and it's a little bit of good and bad. And I would like to think that everyone in this novel is a mixture. No one is unmitigatedly bad or poisonous. They are all problematic, as we all are.
Now, the very interesting thing about this book is the kind of detail that you have put into every character, into the incidents. One can feel the textures, one can hear the sounds, smell the smells, taste the various tastes, and also feel the vibhats that you have created of the Navrasas. What brings this kind of detailing in you?
Well, I was creating a whole world. A book costs a lot of money, and I wanted the reader to feel that let me be immersed in a new world when I'm reading this. So I wanted to render that world very in as detailed and as precise and as dense and as truthfully as I could, so that the reader would instantly enter the world every time he or she picked up the book. Which is why I wanted to hold forth on the tricks of thought, the patterns of behavior, the way people speak, what they eat, what they don't eat, what they think about. Everything had to be dense in its reality. I was writing a realist novel, so I wanted to do it in a full throttled way.
Mm-hmm. The other thing which I found interesting was in the opening, where you say, there's this one sentence, "Bully, come in, don't stand in the veranda in the evening, people can see you." Yeah. And then you take this from different perspectives, the perspectives of the various denizens of the Ghosh household, which kind of sets the tone for the rest of the book.
Yes, I wanted to, it was a good way of introducing the reader to most of the cast. I thought we could go around the houses a bit, and it would be a good introduction to how the house is laid out, what the hierarchies of the people are. I mean, not all the characters come in that opening scene. So Madan, for example, doesn't come in the scene. Crucially, Shupratik doesn't come in the scene.
Shondha doesn't come.
Yeah, Shondha doesn't come in the scene. So, but I wanted the reader to get familiar with most of the characters in the book, and that was a good device to do it.
It was a fantastic device.
Thank you. Also, I wanted it to set the tone for seeing the book from several points of view. I wanted each character to have equal weight on the page when they appeared. And for me, part of the writing is character is plot in some ways. If you can write about a character and his inner life and his outer life as well, as truthfully as you can, then you will have a novel, you will have a story. And I wanted to do that for each of my characters. So point of view, to establish point of view was very, very important for me quite early on. So that's what I was trying to do with that first chapter.
Which you've done brilliantly, but as an author, to live so many characters in such great detail, how easy was it for you?
It's paradoxically actually very easy when you're doing it with a big cast, because it's very entertaining for the author. You jump around from head to head of very different people.
And voice to voice.
And voice to voice, it's quite easy to do. Whereas if you're doing it with 2 or 3 people, it can become too much of an undertaking, and it can begin to weigh you down. But a big cast is better that way. Yes, it's difficult in some ways. You're painting on a bigger canvas. You have to get every little bit of detail right.
There are scenes, where Prafulla Nath goes to the factory and he's accosted by.
Yes, the union trouble. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah,
here again, there are 2 voices. You have the voice of the mill workers, which really is one important perspective, and also of the danger that Prafulla Nath Ghosh faces, or so looking at anything from the various points of view, the various perspectives. How easy was that?
Well, it was as I said, it's easier to jump around between point of views, because one of the things I didn't want my novel to do was to give a unified perspective on things. I wanted everyone to have his or her say, and to keep the camera moving through that scene. It was technically challenging, but also very rewarding. I think I like doing difficult things like that. So
that's amazing. You use the analogy of a camera. How interested are you in films? Do you see this novel becoming a film soon?
I don't think about whether this novel is going to become a film. But I used to be very interested in the cinema. I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was 14 years old. When I was 18 years old, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I started doing my first degree in English in Calcutta, because I thought, right, let me just do a first degree and then I'll go to FTII in Pune and start my film degree. But then I started doing my English degree and things went in a different direction.
In fact, the opening scene that I talk about, well, not the opening scene, the early scene
of Bully being called by his mother, by her mother.
That's we've seen things like that in Vantage Point, for example, isn't it?
Right. Yes. So no, I was not writing consciously thinking this novel can be filmed, but at this late in the game, at this stage of the novel game, it's taken a lot from cinema. There's been a cross-fertilization between the arts. I mean, the novel form has always drawn from different art forms, and I think cinema was one of the most enriching art forms that it drew from. So unconsciously, I must have been thinking about cinema a lot.
Talking about the other details, like the ordinary family life in Bengal, on the one hand, there is great detailing. And yet it feels as if you just opened a window, you're not trying to explain yourself, or you're not being apologetic. It's there for the reader to take it or leave it. Was that conscious? Yes,
it was very conscious, because I didn't want to explain things to the reader, because these things should be obvious in as the book progresses. Lots of things, even words that you don't understand the meaning of first, it's going to make sense in the context. You can probably work it out, and it would be foreign not just to English or American readers, but also I would imagine to readers who are not Bengali. So it would be a foreign world to Maharashtrians and Keralans and Kannadiga. All these people would find it would be an opening to a different world for them, and I wanted to write about that world truthfully, and it's a world I know well. It's not the economic bracket I grew up in, but it's the city I grew up in. I mean, I lived there for the first 22 years of my life, so I know this world like the back of my hand.
Now, this is a world that you describe without emotion, in the sense it's not sentimental.
No.
It's kind of pithy and...
Yes, sentimentality is the death of the novel, I feel, yes. No, it has to be done with compassion, but also a very hard kind of clarity, I feel. And I feel the adjective brutal being used about my book is that I try not to blink when I'm writing, or when I'm seeing something that I want to write about.
Is it easy?
It's easy for me, I think, because I'm a brutal kind of person, I feel. But it may not be easy to other writers. No, sentimentality is not the way to go down. There's a lot of drama inherent in Indian families anyway. One doesn't want to add sentimentality
on top of it, to add
yes,
to the opera.
Yes.
Now, you've been inspired a lot, or at least you've read a lot of Russian literature, and there are reflections, aren't there?
Yes. Well, I grew up in Calcutta, which was the last, communist CPIM ruled state in India at the time I was growing up, and these books, these translations of Russian classics in English, published by Progress Press, beautifully produced and available so cheaply. I have no idea. Only a communist state could do that, like produce books so beautifully and then distribute it for like 10 rupees a book or something. I grew up reading those, and I would imagine that sets the paradigm of the realist novel. Tolstoy and Turgenev,
the bourgeois realism.
Yeah, the bourgeois realist novel. They set the paradigm for it. So I suppose it's in my blood, the 19th century.
And you did revisit Anna Karenina.
I revisited Anna Karenina. I revisit it once every 3 years. It's the book that I've read most, the most number of times, I feel. And I revisited Middlemarch, which I think of as the greatest English novel ever written. Yes, so these were all.
And Master and Margarita.
Master and Margarita, I think, is the greatest 20th century novel ever written. Don't let me start on it. I'll keep on talking about Master and Margarita. Yes, it's.
But you've said somewhere that it is actually Burton Brooks that has, in a way, been the conversation.
Yes,
that led to this.
I wanted to write about the most shining example of a bourgeois realist novel, which has the whole economic origins of the novel form at its core, at its heart. This is Burton Brooks, which is his meditation on mercantile capitalism.
Right.
And nobody calls Burton Brooks a family saga, by the way, which it is. But because I'm Indian, my book gets called a family saga.
No, does that disturb you?
Yeah, it bothers me. I find it funny too. It'll all come out in the wash one day, I feel. But Burton Brooks was the book that I was consciously trying to open up a conversation with in my thinking about how form is caught up, the realist novel form is caught up in a certain kind of economics and politics, namely capitalism and liberal individualism, and whether the novel at this late stage in the game cannot be made to articulate a different kind of ideology from its origins. So that's what I was trying to do.
And Thomas Mann was hardly in his 20s when
he was 26 or 24 years old when he wrote this book in 1905 or 1903. It's a masterpiece.
And he got his Nobel Prize for it.
Well, that was the book that was singled out, yes.
Which are the other influences in your life, which literary influences which have come into this?
It's very difficult to talk about influences because influences happen at the bit of the brain which writers don't really have access to. It cooks away in a place we don't know about. I mean, it's not an unwillingness or a refusal to give you an answer. It's just an inability. I can tell you which writers I like a lot, and I've already mentioned some. I've mentioned Tolstoy and George Eliot, and I mentioned Turgenev. I like Samuel Beckett a lot. I am a great fan of the Australian novelist Patrick White, who also got a Nobel Prize, but is largely not read nowadays, which is a great shame. I like an English writer called Penelope Fitzgerald.
Mm-hmm.
I like an English writer who's still alive, who's in her 80s, called Jane Gardam, who's completely unknown in this country. So no, I can tell you who I like reading. I like A.S. Bart a lot. I like a contemporary English writer, Scottish writer, British writer called Ali Smith. She's extraordinary, I think. She's changing the whole game of the novel. But influences, I do not know. This is for other people to say. You
mentioned A.S. Byatt. Now, about you, when she reviewed this book, she said that the greatest ability or capability that Neil has is to be able to live the life of others. So, how difficult was it to really disassociate yourself, in a sense, and to go into this kind of a world which is not yours?
Well, this is what writers do all the time. They imagine other people's lives. In fact, one of the meanings of my novel is that the lives of others. This is exactly what the novel form is. What is the novel? The novel is a book that is about, a novel is a form that is about the lives of others.
Right.
So we do it on a daily basis. We imagine other people's lives. So
and the title itself is inspired by James Salter.
Yes, I was rereading James Salter's Light Years to teach a class, and that sentence, how can we imagine what our lives should be without the illumination of the lives of others, that leaped out at me, and I immediately had the metaphorical ruling for my novel. I had the spine. I knew exactly what I was going to do.
So for you, is it the title that comes first? or the characters, or the plot, or the
Well,
trajectory?
theoretical thinking for me comes first. I was thinking about the bourgeois realist novel, its ideology, its politics, people who have thought about man, and people who have written Marxist essays on man. So those theoretical things come first. I would imagine, yes, the title comes very early on in my, well, I'm only 2 books old.
Yeah.
So for both books, the titles have come pretty early on.
Of course,
So-
you changed the title for Past Continuum to.
Well, you see, Past Continuous was my title, so I'm very fond of it. And A Life Apart is my agent's title. I like it very much too, but I'm slightly closer to Past Continuous because it was the book with which I first was a published author. So I have an affection for it.
Your first baby.
My first baby, if you will, yes.
But in a sense, it also gives a theme to the kind of writing you're doing, because you talk about a life apart and the life of others, and
I must call my book something completely different.
the next one.
Trains and railroads or something.
That sounds perfect. But the approach has been pretty different in your first novel and the second one. The first is more about probably older relationships, the mothers and daughters.
It's good to change one's game with every book one writes, I feel. Otherwise, one could be writing the same book over and over again. A lot of writers do that. They keep rewriting their first novels. I don't quite want to do this kind of thing. So I hope my third novel is going to be very different from my second and very different from my first. So.
There are certain portions in the book which, especially when you go towards the end or the first part where you talk about Nitai when he kills his family, the abject poverty. You described it in such detail, and sometimes it's unreadable, for the reader.
Yes.
It's not the most pleasant of experiences, and that's the time when you want to push the book aside for a while.
Yeah.
As a writer, how difficult was it for you to, go into those spaces in the mind?
It's difficult.
It is difficult.
It has to be done quickly. You don't want to spend a month writing that particular scene towards the end, which I'm thinking of, which we won't talk about because it'll give the game away. You have to tackle this very quickly. You can't do it while socializing, living an ordinary life, doing it over 2 months, 3 months. It'll make you a different kind of, it makes you a different kind of person when you go into that space. So you'd like to limit that. Period.
So does it affect your own psyche as well?
No, it doesn't affect my own psyche, but not in any very conscious way that I can see. But it's best to get it done quickly.
Over and done with it, cut it off. You spent a lot of time reviewing books, which you still do, of course.
Not anymore. No. I've sort of review very rarely now. I review about 6 or 7 books a year. So
So is it a schizophrenic sort of an identity to be a reviewer and a novelist at the same time, or does it help to have an in-house a resident, if you will?
I feel I am 2 people actually. I feel that the writer who writes reviews is not the writer who writes novels. Or the hand that writes the criticism is not the hand that writes the fiction.
So do the two coexist in your mind?
Well, they do somewhere, but I don't see a split happening, or I don't sense a split happening. I'm just lucky to know that this happens. Otherwise, it would. If the two came together, it may not be a good thing. So
there could be a lot of attrition then.
There could be a lot of attrition, or it may hamper the work, both the reviewing and the criticism and the fiction writing.
The other interesting thing that I want to talk to you about is the fact that you think a lot in Bangla. You take notes in Bangla.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
How do you then constantly translate? Because one tends to write in the language of one's thoughts, and you write in English.
Well, with this particular book, because it is about Bengali people, I made a very early decision that I had to, as I said, I had to render their interiorities, their thoughts, their tricks of mind, their habits of thought, the way they spoke. I had to render it as carefully as possible. And it was not possible for me to write in Bengali, otherwise I would have written a Bengali novel. But to write it in English, I had to make the English slightly unidiomatic.
Right, especially when you have Supratik's letters, for example.
Or for example, when somebody is saying to someone else, oh, you talk so much, you have chewed the worms of my ear, or something. And my editor would look at this and say, Neil, this is not an idiomatic English expression. I said, no, exactly, it's not. It's the Bengali expression is this, and I've exactly translated that word for word. And she said, keep it, because we want that I wanted readers to have that feeling that they are these are people who speak a different language. They are not saying tally ho and they're not speaking English.
Well, they can't, and we see a lot of this in a lot of the English Indian writing. The use of right from Arundhati Roy, the use of idioms which are very Indian,
Yes.
but which can't really be understood by anyone
Yes.
except for
Yes.
Indians, and
Yes.
sometimes even by Indians in that local area.
Yes, yes. And also what happens sometimes is that one can tend to overuse Indian words, Bengali words, or Malayali words or whatever. But it can be done judiciously. You
Yes.
can reach a nice balance. That was a tricky tightrope to walk, actually, I feel.
And you walked it well.
I don't know, it's for readers to say whether I walked it well.
Well, Lee, we thank you so much for being on this program.
Thank you for
and,
having me.
Sharing the insights about the book, and all the best for the book.